Could you tell people a little bit about you and how you got to this point? I've read your book, Conscious Recovery, and we are going to talk about relationships, but I also want to pull that into addictions at some point here. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get here?
Thank you. And some of us might even be addicted to relationships, which we can talk about, right?
Yes.
I got here, I could tell you a really long version, but I'm going to tell a somewhat short version. And I start at the very beginning because it's foundational for my work. And I'm guessing based on just being with you for this short time, Loretta, that this is foundational for you too. And that is we come into the world as these whole and perfect spiritual beings. Now, some people believe we come in and bring things from past lives, come in to learn a lesson. There's a lot of different beliefs around why we're here on planet Earth. But in my experience, I came in filled with happiness and joy, just feeling like the luckiest little kid on planet Earth and lying in the backyard on a hot summer day in Indiana, mesmerized by life. And I also, came into a world where I heard the way the tall people were talking about people of different races, people, how men were talking about women, how there was so much judgment. And I saw war on the TV and all of these experiences. I look at it now and I think I almost short circuited. Like it was just too much for my soul to be, or my spirit to be so open. And so I closed down. And the reason I like to start with that is that closing down was a pivotal moment because it was there that I separated from my true nature and started to believe a whole lot of lies. So my work has become helping people get back to the original perfection that we came in as, and also look at all the different ways we were programmed, consciously or unconsciously, by the world to believe that we're broken in some way or we're limited in some way. So I start with that because I think that's foundational for the point of view, whether we're talking about relationships, addiction, or just creating the life of our dreams. It starts with that.
Wow. You hit the nail right on the head, TJ. I could have said exactly what you said. And
I imagine that's true.
I remember, I really do. As a kid, I just felt like I was just some sort of like, where am I? And I was just this little light, running around and shut down. Yeah. Right. Because I learned very quickly, we don't talk about our imaginary friends, and please do not talk about the dead woman in the back bedroom. She's not actually there, Loretta.
Right, right.
Okay. Right. Yeah. This idea, man, you said something so wonderful. To return to our original perfection and the broken, that we somehow are taught to believe we're broken or there's something wrong with us that needs to be fixed.
Right. Yeah. And that's the key because so many of us believe that at such a deep level that we come into either, like, let's say recovery or therapy or spiritual practice, whatever it is, where we're on this journey to try to be happy, quite frankly. And I love that it's National Power Smile Day, right? A lot of us just want to be happy, or most of us just want to be happy. But when we believe we're broken, then we start looking to the world to make us happy. That's where we get into trouble because the world can't really make us happy. There's this incredible paradox with this. The world is as it is, but when I feel broken and when I feel damaged and I'm disconnected from my true nature or my original perfection, then it's like I have my umbilical cord in my hand and I'm trying to get fed from the world, and it just doesn't really fulfill. And so we think it's about getting to some kind of destination, but really it's about returning to who and what we already are. It's already within us. There's actually not a search, and that can be a lot for the mind to comprehend. Maybe too much for the mind to comprehend.
Yeah, but I have a lot of people that come to me, and I hear quite often people say, especially they're talking about either their life or relationship, and they'll go, I just want to connect, Loretta. I just want to connect. Or I'm trying to connect with that person, or I'm trying to connect with that thing. And why can't I connect? They just keep sliding away, or they keep leaving.
Yeah.
And this idea of connectedness.
Yeah. And that to me is really the deeper conversation here. And you already kind of prompted us to have this deeper conversation in the intro. And that is, why do I keep finding myself in these same situations over and over again? And like you, or like your clients that were saying to you, I think what we all do want is love and connection. That's what I desperately wanted. But what was interesting is when that wall was, I was going to say when I put that wall around my heart, it almost felt like something or someone else did it. So when that wall was built around my heart, it did protect me, but it was also protecting me from the love and connection I desired. And when I believe I'm broken, and maybe unconsciously, I'm trying to connect with someone, desperately trying to connect. But if I have a core false belief, so here's a perfect example. I decided at a very young age I was unlovable. And so I walked around the world with this frequency of I'm not lovable. It was a vibration, much more than just a thought or a narrative. And I could walk into a room and I would unconsciously choose the person to confirm the core false belief. On the conscious level, I was desperately wanting to connect, but I kept choosing these people who couldn't possibly love me. And they were beautiful humans, by the way, but I wanted it to be their fault. There's a lot to unpack there, but the bottom line is, when we believe we're broken, we will unconsciously choose to see that in the world, but only 100% of the time. So the healing must happen from within.
You know, there is this thing too, where people say to me, we connected through our trauma.
Yeah.
Right. You know, because we had this, like, I saw in you, you know, you just needed to be loved, and you'd had this bad childhood, and these people did these terrible things to you. And so, you know, I'm looking at you going, I can relate to that. I have the same issue, and we can get together and be just fine. So,
what's interesting about that to me is I think it's easy to go into the rightness or wrongness of that. And I spent many years saying things like, my narrative sounded like this. Well, yeah, we were these two dysfunctional puzzle pieces that found each other, and then we locked in with each other, and we found this dysfunctional pattern. I have a really different point of view about that now. And this is very interesting and nuanced. I think that can be part of the healing. And I think, of course, we find people that have what we call a trauma bond, right? If my trauma is not healed, I'm going to walk around again with that vibration. I'm going to find someone to match that in some way. This is why when someone is in an abusive relationship, it's the tendency is to blame who we call the abuser. And of course, we want people to be safe, and we don't want people to be for example, in a violent relationship. We need to unplug from that, but that's only the first step. And then we don't want to blame ourselves, but we want to be accountable for what the healing is required. So interestingly enough, I think all of those journeys that we go through where we find these people that we could call dysfunctional relationships, I actually think they are functioning for something. I think it is part of the healing process. But we reach a point where we realize that the deeper healing it has to be from the inside out, not the outside in.
There's so much in what you're saying. I'm going to go back and pull out some things because it's rich. And as far as I'm concerned, it's straight to the point. When we are caught up in, like, for instance, everybody talks about the narcissist and the empath.
Right.
Yeah. Narcissist, empath. First of all, now we've got two labels.
Yeah.
It's a narcissist and that's an empath. And then somebody comes and they go, I know what it is, Loretta. It's the narcissist and the empath. And now we're locked into something. But I want to pick that apart a little bit. I want your expertise in that. What is that all about? Just talk to it, because to me that just opens up the conversation.
Well, I think in a very simple way, and I'm going to speak for me. I love Byron Katie. When I heard her speak, she said, this is true for me. It might not be for you. So I often use that now. This is true for me. It might not be for you. I think it's convenient to label in some ways, because then I don't have to be 100% accountable. And nothing's more painful than 99% accountability. Right. So when I label someone as the narcissist, then they get to be the bad person and I get to be the good person, because there's an inherent value for most people that empath is good and narcissist is bad. We all have all of it within us. And if we want to even go, deeper spiritually, we're all one anyway. So once we label someone, we're in this dualistic relationship where we're playing these roles. But the truth is, I have I can be narcissistic and I can be empathetic, right? And the issue with the labeling, as I said, is then we end up saying, well, it's that person's fault. And as soon as we're in that victim martyr consciousness. And then we're in blame. Blame is a low level of consciousness. It's not a bad thing. It's just, what does it create when we're in there? Well, it creates less happiness and more pain. So then it becomes so simple. Do I want to be free? And if I want to be free, I want to move beyond the labels and I want to look at what needs to change within me. The reason I'm focusing on this multiple times, it's the mind is a trickster. Someone will hear me say, are you saying their behavior is not bad or wrong? What I'm saying is, rather than labeling it bad or wrong, we want to look at what we actually can shift, and that is our own journey, our own perspective. We unplug from wanting the world to change. I spent my entire 20s thinking if the world could just change, I would be happy. What an interesting decade. It didn't really work, by the way, because I realized, and then here's the paradox. The only person I can change is me. And then I start to change my lens, and then the world seemed to magically change.
Yeah. Oh, so many great truths in that. So I'm thinking about the Cartman triangle, the dreaded drama triangle, right? You know, and this idea that, that's a narcissist over there. And then this idea that, okay, so XYZ happens, that person does whatever. And then you just go, oh, well, they're a narcissist. Right. You know, that's what it is. And then you tootle along, and then pretty soon you're in a relationship with another narcissist, right? Because you haven't really addressed right here.
Well, and the beauty of that is we want to make sure, I think for me, I want to infuse into the conversation, and I touched on it because in my journey, I went from blaming the world to blaming myself.
Yes.
And that also kept me stuck. If anything, it was more painful because honestly, blaming the world, we see a significant percentage of the world doing that. We see countries blaming each other. We see political parties blaming each other. We see genders blaming each other. We see sexual orient. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's something about that is convenient. You know, when I did a talk the other day and I started with saying, spiritual principles are inconvenient because I need to be accountable for my life, right? And like there's something that's really fun about blaming the world, but I'm getting off on a tangent. But when I shift to blaming myself, I'm still in that same frequency, and then it's even more painful. So we want to move beyond blame and move into curiosity. My favorite word is, let me be curious about this. Let me be curious about what it is, not why do I keep attracting unavailable people, because that's sort of that's a blame statement. But what is it about me that I keep choosing this? And what is wanting to be healed? If I start to look at it as an opportunity for healing and become curious about it, life is an experiment. Oh, what is possible within me to start to shift so that I start choosing differently? Because that's really what it's about. If we're not choosing consciously, we're choosing unconsciously. And most of us are creating our lives from the unconscious or subconscious.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to say this too. I think spiritual principles are inconvenient. I think that's your $1 million t-shirt idea, by the way.
It just came to me the other day when I was speaking. I'd never
I'd wear that shirt. Before. Yeah. And I also think that we need to have a sense of humor when we're doing this heavy work. But this idea, this shame thing, this blame guilt game, right? And you're absolutely right. People go from it's all their fault to, oh my gosh, it's all my fault. And so many people come to me and they go, Loretta, what am I doing wrong?
Exactly.
Or what thought process do I need to fine tooth comb my way through? You know, or I said a bad word, erase, and we get all caught up in that, right? Thank you.
Well, I was part of a community where if you would say anything other than what someone considered to be positive, they would say, erase, cancel, say it now. Right?
I know. To where, I end up with, I have the beautiful privilege of having a sacred, safe place, which I know you do too, where this is where we're going to throw it out into the room, and we're actually going to talk about the ugly part. Yeah,
absolutely.
We're going to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I woke up one day and I, we've been in the paradigm where we say we're spiritual beings having a human experience for a long time now, hundreds of years, right? And I woke up one day and thought, what if we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience? That we're actually, that the mind wants some of it to be spiritual. And you could use different words there, positive, negative, good, bad. And the mind is just programmed very deeply. And maybe its function is to live in duality. What's safe, what isn't. But when we're in the good, bad, right, wrong paradigm, then we're not aware possibly that it's all rich, right? We think of shift happens, right? We know the original word but I also thought fertilizer happens. Just with one shift in perspective, I realized that what I once called something bad can become fertilizer for the transformation of my soul, and that it really is about integrating that. And I know, you and I can already get a sense from you that we're not about abandoning the deeper, what we call shadow work, because that's all spiritual. There's nothing wrong here. Let's integrate that and use it as transformation.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I'm a firm believer we need to get it out. There's so much in this, because it can be pretty easy, and it can be complicated if the throat has been shut down, if you have not had a voice, if you have been told, no, you can't be the way that you are, right? Or you've got to be this way, or, whatever it is, spending so much time and energy and consciousness trying to be who you think other people think you should be. Right. Or how can I be to fit into the external world in my distorted perception of it? I'm exhausted just trying to say that, right? but it's the work, right? Yeah,
there is.
It's absolutely the work.
It is the work, and what I think to lean into it a little bit, we have experiences usually in our very early life because our brains aren't developed yet, so we absorb more, right? And like we said at the beginning, like we're so open, right? We're so wide open that we absorb the energy from the people around us. But the interesting piece, and this is where the point of power is to me, we might have been victims to situations when we were kids, right? Someone who sexually abused someone. There's all these ways that we can say, yeah, that we didn't have control over that. We absorbed that. But the point of power is to look less at what happened. We're not negating what happened or pretending it didn't. But what did I decide about myself based on what happened? Two people having the exact same situation come to an instantaneous different conclusion. And then the trajectory of our life is based on the conclusion, not the event. So in a way, and this is my provocative statement, in a way we can change the past because we have a story about what happened, but we don't really know exactly what happened. But the key is, what did I decide? What did I decide? For me, I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not smart. Those were the conclusions I came to. And I have a story about what created them. But when I was doing some of my early work, I talked to my sisters and I thought, well, they'll have different versions of the story. But what I found is they had totally different stories, not even different versions. I had a story. Dad was never home. He was busy with people who weren't my mom. He was a workaholic. I had all these judgments, right? The conclusion I came to is I'm not lovable. My sister said, what are you talking about? Our dad was always home. We went on these great vacations. He was at dinner every night. And I'm thinking, what really happened? What really happened? And I came to it doesn't matter as much what happened. And again, I want to be really careful. We're not trying to pretend something didn't happen. We would never want to say to someone, maybe it didn't really happen, but we want to look at the point of power being, what did you decide?
Yeah. So we're going to take a little station break. I love this conversation, TJ, so much. It's, in my opinion, it's the heart of the issue and something that needs to be talked about. So my guest today is TJ Woodward, and we're talking about toxic relationships. We'll probably talk a little bit about addictions. And of course, we're going to say, okay, now what? Now what? What do we do now? Right? So we're going to take a little station break. This is Loretta Brown. We'll be right back.
All clear, kids, for a couple minutes. What's one of your favorite memories?
Let's see. Well, there was this one time I went snorkeling in the Caribbean when I was a kid. It really just blew my mind. I mean, when you're sitting on the beach, it's so peaceful and you sort of forget there's a whole other world under there just full of all kinds of life. We saw the most beautiful corals. I remember thinking they were waving at us as they moved with the ocean. And then there were all these amazing fish. They kind of reminded me of tropical birds. They were so bright and colorful, just darting all over the place like birds in the sky. I'll never forget it. It completely changed the way I look at the ocean.
Most of us have a memory of being in nature we'll never forget. Let's protect the world's natural places so more memories can be made for generations to come. Visit worldwildlife.org.
Did you know that Reiki healing can be done at a distance? It's true. So let Reiki Oasis focus powerful energy to help relieve your stress, grief, sadness, anger, and so much more. Convenient, personalized treatments at a distance can increase lightness of being. During your appointment, find a quiet place to lie down or sit to receive healing energies. If you want help with your dis-ease, visit ReikiOasis.com. Harness life's energy. Visit ReikiOasis.com today.
Have something important to say? Want to help improve our world? Need to promote your business uniquely and effectively? KKNW is the answer. Our staff helps broadcasters and podcasters create professional sounding audio. Bring your talent and let our experts help you craft a radio show or podcast that best delivers your message. Learn more at 1150kknw.com. That's 1150kknw.com. KKNW, talk variety that's live and local. Alternative Talk 1150, here to uplift your day.
Y'all ready to come back? All right, stand by. Funny.
Thank you for the music, Benny. It's always the best. Anyway, welcome back to the original Loretta Brown Show. And my guest today is TJ Woodward. And I want to remind people that these shows are available to download and listen to free anytime you want to at the KKNW 1150 AM archives for the original Loretta Brown Show. We're also on YouTube, iTunes, Podcast One, Spotify, Megaphone, Twitter. I'm sure there's others. Anyway, you get the idea. And there's all kinds of shows, hundreds, thousands, lots. And I hope they will help you and bless you on your way. So we are talking about toxic relationships. What a great conversation. We're also talking about our own self and our distortions or the way that the patterns that we accept. Just before the break, TJ was talking about the fact that it's what we decide about ourselves from an event that puts those, I don't know what you want to say, those dark colored glasses on ourselves, that when we look at the world, you know, we have a tendency to keep drawing to ourselves the same toxic relationships. So you were talking about, you know, curiosity as being one of the things that can help us. What do we do about this? Like, how do we get into this type of work? Where do we go if we're trying to, like, for instance, someone said to me the other day, what am I doing that I keep having these people, you know, these relationships with people who are projects and need healing, or I have such a need not to be abandoned. And then of course they're going to abandon me. So jump right in there.
Yeah, I want to start with sort of a recap of what we want to say that might be a limited way to work with it. I'm really careful the way I frame. You know, we tend to use words like wrong or dysfunctional or unhealthy. Like, who wants to say I'm unhealthy? But we want to look at the effectiveness, right? So we talked about, like, get rid of the toxic person or get rid of the narcissist. And we know that's very limited because then we find ourselves choosing the same person. Or then we say, well, we keep attracting these people, right? So what needs to be healed within me? So what we want to look at, to answer your question, is the point of origin. And some of us can have that moment where we're like, oh, I remember that day in kindergarten. And this is true for me. I remember the day in kindergarten I decided I was stupid. Not everyone has that moment that's in conscious memory. But the key here is we decided these things before our brains were even developed. So we can't really talk ourselves out of it through the intellect alone. And this is really important because we hear people saying, change your narrative, change your story. We'll just have a different belief, use affirmations. And of course, that's all useful. It was such an important part of my journey because I didn't even know I was walking around brutalizing myself. So being aware that I had the narrative and then trying to change it was important. The deeper work is having that point of tenderness, compassion for the little me that decided these huge things. I remember looking at my nephew when he turned 7, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's the age I decided the world was unsafe and I was unlovable. What I call it is core false beliefs. I call it core false beliefs because I want to acknowledge they're lies we pick up about ourselves. They get buried, or the word I like to use is concretized into our unconscious when we're at such a tender age. And then we develop all kinds of strategies to manage it. And you talked about this earlier, right? Maybe someone who feels unworthy becomes highly successful. Let me get straight A's because then mommy and daddy will love me. That kind of thinking. And that becomes an unconscious strategy, or what I call a brilliant strategy in the world. So we want to get back to the point of origin. And if we can't remember the moment, just the little me that decided these huge things, like I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. We can talk more about how we actually heal it, but it's not about changing the narrative only or looking in the mirror and saying, I am worthy of a loving relationship. That's only a small part of the journey.
Yeah, delve into that a little bit because the inner child, the little self, I, of course, in my own personal journey and people I work with, yeah, it is that moment. And oh my goodness, I look at kids, I love kids. And I look at kids and they have their big eyes. And I'm honest, I love little girls, but little boys, I don't know what the deal is. I'm like, what? I take them all home with me, all of them, and keep them right there. No, right? But yeah, that tender age. So how do we work with that inner child? How do we go back? Because you're absolutely right. No amount of talking or thinking is going to get us out of there.
Yeah, this is why people can get quote unquote stuck in therapy. And therapy is a wonderful thing. If I'm only doing narrative therapy, which just is like talk therapy. And so I went to therapy for many years and I knew the patterns. I knew, I had a mother who I would label as narcissistic, right? Or a mother who was unavailable or, loved those little diet pills. And back in the day, those were very strong uppers, right? This was like meth. I had a dad who, I had all the stories, I had the patterns, but I'm like, but nothing's changing. My awareness of it isn't changing it. So when we do the deeper inner child work, I like to start where we started the show, and that is underneath all of these wounds, there's still the place of perfection. There is still that little child with the eyes wide open, the power smile. I love we're going back to that, but that effervescence is innate, right? So if we start there, then we can start to look at when did we decide that we're other than that? And when did we decide that we're less than love, less than infinite being? And we look at those decisions and we have a place of tenderness. And for me, the deeper work is emotional. It's most of us didn't get allowed to feel, right? So when I was a little kid, back in the day, if you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. Go to your room till you can start crying. I have a lot of compassion for my mother. The 1950s books, I was born in the middle of the 60s. So she's a product of the 1950s. Those books said, let your babies sit in their bed and cry until they fall asleep. Don't go hold them, right? I mean, that's literally what we were taught. So all these attachment wounds happened at a very young age. I remember being in my crib. I remember holding the bars and just screaming for my mother, screaming and shaking. That was this visceral moment. I don't even know if I could have a core false belief from that, but I remember being terrified. So letting our younger selves feel, when I do inner child work, the 3 phrases I use are, it's okay to feel that way. It's safe for you to feel that. And I'm here for you. That's the inner child work. Because even with inner child work, sometimes I hear people trying to talk their child out of the core decision or talk them out of the feeling. You're going to be okay. Don't worry, I'm here. We want to allow ourselves to feel from that point of origin so that we can actually come to a different conclusion.
That is so true. There's that old healing adage, you have to feel it to heal it. But there's a truth to that. I look at it as being able to journey through that, right? Like if when I'm feeling something, the first thing I do is lock myself up and shut it down or shove it over into the shadow, or like, oh no, Loretta, good girls don't do that. We just have our power smile, right?
That's right.
Keep going, right?
Yes. Be pretty, be sweet. I mean, yeah, all the things. Yeah.
Get your pink bow in your hair, right? Thanks for laughing. I can tell we're on the same sheet of music. But this idea that man, I love what you said. It's okay to feel it. It's safe to feel it.
And I'm here.
It's safe to feel it. And I'm here for you, because I think a lot of people are afraid to feel their feelings.
Absolutely. And it's because it was scary when we were young. So compassion, right? I mean, most of us didn't. I mean, when I had, okay, let me. If you look at a really young child, or what I call a pre-programmed human, 2 years old, 3 years old, they feel very deeply. They let us know exactly what they're feeling. And if we let them have what we label as a temper tantrum, they move through it and come back to this homeostasis, which is joy. We end up telling them not to cry. Here's a piece of candy. We punish them. In some severe cases, we hit them, right? So there are these major scary events for most of us around feeling. So of course we bury our feelings. Of course we put them in the shadow. Of course we drink when we feel. Of course we go shopping when we feel. So that place of compassion is like, of course, this is how I've worked with it. But now I know I am safe. There's no one here that's going to hit me. And if there is, we want to first get out of that relationship, right? I actually do have the capacity to feel. When I do work with helping people heal trauma, specifically around addiction, we think it's about the trauma, but it really isn't. It's about what's present in the moment. And if we can allow someone to actually sit with the emotion, even if it's 2 minutes, oh, no one hit me. I worked with I was facilitating a group in treatment many years ago, and we had a gay male client. And most of the men in the room, well, all the other men in the room were not gay. And he was shaking. And he said, I believe if I talk about my relationship right now, one of you will hit me. I know that's not true. You're all these beautiful, loving men. But he was literally shaking. So the healing wasn't to say to him, no one's going to hit you. The healing was, see if you can be present with that for a minute. And these men were able to hold him, not physically, but hold him energetically, so that he could feel that for a few minutes and realize how much trauma was locked in his body around the fear. It wasn't about what was happening in real time, but the healing can come from just allowing ourselves to feel.
That's going to make me cry.
And me too. It was such a beautiful moment.
Well, this idea that we're so locked up is, to me, it's the key. That is the healing. Mm-hmm. And also, you were talking earlier about this wall around the heart, and how many times have people been hurt or betrayed or abandoned, and the very first thing they do is they go, I'm going to gear up and make sure that never happens again. Right. I'm just going to put this great big shield, and then I'm going to wonder why nobody comes in. Right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. This might sound a little bit of a detour here, but when we think about the idea of narcissists and empaths, people who identify as empathic, and I think you and I would say we are, we might say, I'm an empath, so I need to protect myself from the energy around me. Yeah. And I think that is another form of a wall. And I understand why, because people can take on, but there's a deeper awareness when I realize that I'm an infinite being. And when I'm not in my personality self, but in my essential self, I don't have to put up a barrier. There's nothing inherently wrong with feeling what other people are feeling. The key here is I don't take it on as my responsibility, But being, an empath is a great gift, of course. But there's a tendency maybe early in our development where we think, oh my gosh, I need to protect myself. And that's really the work I do with clinicians working in the addiction treatment field, because, there's so much chaos and so much darkness that sometimes people take it on and they think I need to protect myself. But that protection is a barrier to actually connecting.
I could talk so much about that. I'm an excessively strong empath and have gone through everything, and I realized a long, long time ago that a barrier is not useful. And also, a lot of people are they're in some kind of a hypervigilance where they melt into the other person and they want the person to melt into them. That's also not healthy.
Right.
But recognizing, and I'm going to bring it back to your internal work comment you made earlier, like the work, you have to live life from the inside out. When you know thyself, when you love yourself, when you do that internal healing work, you just know who you are and you can be in the world, and recognize, number one, we're all co-creators here, so that victim thing, we drop that a little bit. We work on the shame, blame, guilt, right? And we begin to perceive life in a very different way.
Right.
So yes, my empath ability, I know yours does too, works very well for the work that I came to do in this world. Right. Yeah.
So beautifully said, because we honor all the different stages, right? When I was, maybe we could say in my development as an empath, I was wanting everyone to like melt into me, and I wanted to fix all their pain, right? I was in that, and like I had the ability to do that, and it kind of became overwhelming to my system. So I understand why people would want to put up the wall. But what we're saying here is that at some point of our development, we want to bring the wall down. That's why I sometimes will be provocative and say we don't need boundaries, just to hook someone.
Yeah.
And then I go on to say what I mean by that. Like, a boundary is a wall. And, like in the work that we do as either counselors or therapists, of course we have professional boundaries. Of course, we're not going to try to fix the person. But here's the key to this. When I understand that no one's broken, I'm not here to fix anyone. I'm here to be a presence. And true connection, because that's what we all desire, is really about bringing that barrier down, not in a way of like, I'm here to fix you, or what we would call codependent. Not a huge fan of the word, but that's the word we have. We're really about a deep connection, and the healing. I'm not here to heal anyone. I'm here to be a presence for someone to do their own healing and to begin to understand, not intellectually, but energetically, that they can actually heal. And healing's not even the right word. It's really a return to wholeness. It's a return to who they really are.
Yeah. Beautifully said. A return to wholeness. That is it. Yeah, that is it. Many, many ways to talk about that. Like, I sometimes say when you allow yourself to be who you're meant to be, which is to me, like, what does that mean? Right? But there is this exploratory journey. So you have the conscious recovery method. We're talking about toxic relationships today, but you go over into addictions of all kinds. And of course, toxic relationships can be an addiction, I think.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, maybe the greatest addiction we have is these believing the lies about ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm just sitting for a second. So talk for just a minute. We've got, I don't know, a couple of minutes left is all we've got. Talk about your conscious recovery method, and and kind of spread that out from toxic. I realize I'm giving you a minute to do this, to addictions.
Yeah, I mean, briefly said, I came into working in the field in 2008, the field being addiction treatment. And I saw this sort of pervasive framework of looking at our clients as broken and only treating instead of actually healing. So I became curious about what I could create to help people actually return to their true nature and heal the trauma, disconnection, and shame that I identify as the root causes of addiction. We actually can help our clients heal. They're not broken. So the foundational principle of conscious recovery is underneath all addictive behavior is an essential self that's whole and perfect. So that's a very brief overview of what conscious recovery is. It's a book, it's a workbook, it's curriculum, and I do clinical trainings and treatment programs throughout the world.
I love that. Where can people find you? And where can people find you?
I think the best place is Instagram, TJ Woodward _. Then in the profile on Instagram, you can see everything else, the books, any of the courses I have, all of the speaking events I do.
So underneath all this Venus influence from now until through October, for all those people out there searching for love and connection, what would you like to say to them?
What I want to say to anyone watching right now, is if no one's told you today, you are an infinite being. You came into the world as a whole and perfect being that is still who and what you are. This is not about connecting with someone from the outside in, but from the inside out. Be that love. We're not here to attract anything. We're here to radiate. Through that radiating of love, we will naturally find that in the world.
Oh my goodness, what a joy and delight to have you on my show today, TJ Woodward. And everybody, you should just check him out, get his books.